that I've given this book to Ella, as well as another one of my close friends, as well as my romantic partner. I'm pretty addicted to recommending this book. I like it because it is somewhat so unlikable, and so I almost sometimes also see it as like a compatibility test with my loved ones, right?
I love that. Yeah. Welcome to Red Wine Reads, a community of book lovers talking about our favorite and not so favorite books while pouring a glass or two of wine. I'm your host, Jenna Weston, and with me today is Ella Kopaikin and a very special guest, her roommate, Dorothy. Now, before we start, I should warn you that we do spoil the endings of their books or reviews, so if you don't like that, then please go finish the book, come right back to this episode. But we will be giving you a lay of the land if you haven't read the book nor plan to, so if you haven't read it, we still welcome you into this conversation. Here's what you can expect from every episode. We start with a super short summary and then some quick facts to get you oriented. Then we will answer the question, would you recommend this book? A simple yes or no and a few supporting details. Then we will spend the majority of the episode arguing why or why not we would recommend this book. We will end the show with final ratings out of 5 and pairings, where we will pick drinks, TV shows, movies, and other books that might pair well with today's read. Each episode also hosts its own drinking game, so whatever your drink of choice, wine, cocktails, mocktails, coffee, water, we hope that you'll sip along with us. Today we are reading Even Cowgirls Get the Blues by Tom Robbins. Now this book was brought to me by Ella because Dorothy, her roommate, had recommended it to her. This 1970s cult classic of a book is Dorothy's all-time favorite book, and she recommends it to everyone she knows. And so Ella is no different, and we decided to read it on the podcast. Now, you may have remembered in the last episode that Ella predicted that she would absolutely love it. I would probably not like it as much. And that was pretty much how it went. But it was a civil conversation between 3 people, 2 of which this book really resonated with them, and they really liked it, and then one of which, aka me, it did not so much. So we love seeing the 2 separate sides of this conversation, and we love seeing a healthy disagreement on many points in this book and what this book has to offer. So without further ado, let's pull some corks and get reading. Again, this week we read Even Cowgirls Get the Blues by Tom Robbins. Welcome, Ella, to another episode of Red Wine Reads. I see you brought a guest. How exciting.
A confidant, a friend. My Dorothy.
That's me.
My roommate, Dorothy.
I
love it. So, Dorothy, what are we reading today? What are we reviewing?
Yes, today we are reading Even Cowgirls Get the Blues, which is a book that I read when I was 20, and then I immediately decided it was my favorite book. And I haven't changed my mind since, but I also haven't really reread it since. So we're going to be going off of 20-year-old Dorothy's infatuated feelings about this book, at least from my side.
I love that.
And I was gifted this copy by Dorothy for my birthday, which made me go, oh, guess what we should read on the podcast? Much to a little woman named Jenna's chagrin.
It was payback. I made Ella read the Shamshine Blind, so we had some beef to work out. No, it's...
Revenge is a dish best served brine.
I was going to say blue, but that's okay.
Heyo. All right, well, let's get into it, because I have a feeling this is going to be a long one, a very great long one, in that matter. But we're reading Even Cowgirls Get the Blues, Tom Robbins, and the drinking game for this episode. I have a Vienna Lager by Devil's Backbone. I used it to make beer cheese, so we have a few left. So.
Wow, you made beer cheese.
I made beer cheese, homemade pretzels and beer cheese. And what do you have over there in those beautiful glasses?
A drink of the summer.
Which is a pickle margarita. Ella and I made one, I guess, a few months ago now, and we've been drinking them pretty nonstop.
Yeah, it's actually huge. If anybody wants the recipe, it is the New York Times pickle brine margarita recipe, and it is the drink of the summer.
Yeah.
Okay. I will have to make one after this. Honestly, I love pickles. It's right up my alley. All right, well, let's get into drinking game. So, we have 4 rules for this episode. The first rule is sip anytime Jenna says I'm confused or has some question. I have some questions.
Yeah.
Anytime that sort of thing happens, because I promise you there will be a few times.
Yeah.
And then sip every time we mention thumbs.
Gonna be mentioned a lot.
We will mention that one a lot. Drink and whoop every time we talk about whooping cranes.
Whoop, whoop.
There it is. And take a drop of your drink from your finger and put it in your mouth if we say. You guys go. You can say it.
Ha ha, ho ho.
Hee hee.
There it is. Beautifully done. Beautifully done.
I was pretty proud of that rule. I'm not gonna lie.
Alrighty, well let's get right into it. So 60-second summary. Dorothy, do you want to do it or Ella?
I think Ella's the one who's just read it, so I'm gonna let Ella take this one
I'm
away.
the only one who's both read the whole thing and read it recently. So
all right. Let's get into it.
okay. So Sissy Hangshaw is a young girl with a lot of dreams born in South Richmond, Virginia during the Eisenhower years. She's born with thumbs that are gigantic and they just keep growing. She has brothers and a father that underestimates her, but she grows up and she decides she's going to be a hitchhiker. So she hitchhikes all the way across the country and even to Europe and all around the world. And then she ends up somehow in New York City for a period of time where she meets a man named the Countess. And the Countess hires her to be a model periodically. So she has cash. She has cash to travel around the country. And one day she ends up, well, first actually she meets the man who's going to be her husband named Julian. And he is an indigenous painter, but he's also really misogynistic and mean. And he tries to keep her down, but she says no. So then she goes to the Countess's ranch. The Countess's ranch is supposed to be a place where people lose weight, but actually it's full of rootin' tootin' cowgirls. One of them is named Bonanza Jellybean, who will turn out to be Sissy Hangshaw's true love. And they have a splendid time. And also during her time at the ranch, she meets a man who we're going to talk about. He's in a cave, and he is in charge of something called the Clockworks. And he is basically a hermit with wise beyond his years. Anyway, there's also a bunch of cranes. In the end, Sissy questions herself, but she has a moment where she thinks she has to get rid of her thumbs. Then she kind of like realizes that she doesn't have to get rid of them and that she's okay as who she is. And then she goes back to the ranch eventually, and Bonanza Jellybean gets killed because the government is trying to stop the whooping cranes from landing it. Anyway, it's confusing, but Sissy's at the core of it, and that's the end.
Yeah, that was about 2 minutes, but hey, that was really close. You did good. Awesome. Well, we'll get into some quick facts real quick, and then we'll get into our discussion. So this book was published in 1976.
Bicentennial.
And it has very mixed reviews on every single platform that you will find. So it has a 3.8 out of 5 on Goodreads, a 3.6 out of 5 on Storygraph. It was adapted into a 1993 film by Gus Van Sant, starring Uma Thurman, Lorraine Bracco, and Keanu Reeves.
You want it to be better with that cast.
Yeah. I watched the trailer and I was like, oh, sure, like let me try the movie. I got about 5 minutes in and I was like, I don't think it's gonna be my kind of movie.
I don't know who could read this book and think I can make a movie out of this. That does not even.
Well, weirdly, like Gus Van Sant would be the person that I'd be like, you can make a movie out of that, and he did do well. So
he failed. So that's saying a lot. That's saying how hard this book is to make into a movie.
Yeah. I think it's just the thumbs that got me. I was like, I can't take it seriously.
Yeah, no, for sure.
But so Tom Robbins, he is 92, still kicking. His most notable works are considered semi-comedies, so also known as a comedy drama, if you will. He was enrolled at the Richmond Professional Institute, which later would become Virginia Commonwealth, VCU. He was enrolled there in 1957 for the School of Art, Drama, and Music. Makes a lot of sense there. And then in 2000, Robbins was named one of the 100 best writers of the 20th century by Writer's Digest. And while the legendary Italian critic Fernanda Pavano called Robbins one of the most dangerous writers in the world.
Okay.
So,
controversial character. He's dangerous. He's dangerous, ladies and gentlemen.
I think it was meant as a compliment, but I'm not sure.
Right to the dagger by his side.
Yeah, exactly.
But here we go. So this is a simple yes or no with a few supporting facts. Would you recommend the book? Yes or no? Starting with Dorothy.
Well, yes. And as is evidenced by the fact that I've given this book to Ella, as well as another one of my close friends, as well as my romantic partner. I'm pretty addicted to recommending this book, but anyways, I'll just stop there.
Yeah,
No.
love it.
Give your opinions. Why?
Well, I just think that I like it because it is somewhat so unlikable, and so I almost sometimes also see it as like a compatibility test with my loved ones, right?
I love that.
And so I know not everyone that I love will love this book, but I think that my loved ones that do love this book understand a part of me that maybe other people don't.
Yeah, it's also so fascinating now. Dorothy's romantic partner is Turkish, and imagine reading this book in your second language. Because reading it as a first language is really hard, so I can imagine.
Yeah, I actually researched a lot to find him a Turkish version of it, and I found one on this like weird bootleg website. And I got it for him for his birthday one year, and he said he tried to read it, and it was really poorly written and very confusing. And I was like, well, that gives me no information as to whether it was well translated.
Did he end up reading it and enjoying it?
He hasn't read it in English yet. Okay. I have read him passages out loud by force on one occasion, but baby steps. We'll get there.
Okay. Oh yeah, we will get there.
Ella, would you recommend this book? Yes or no?
I mean, yeah. I'm gonna go ahead and read what my bullet points said. Cowgirls hitchhiking Eisenhower. Okay. I love the desert. I love, excuse me, I'm getting choked up. I love the open road, and I love U.S. history. I just simply could not put this book down. And it's so funny because I was talking to one of our other friends about it, and he was like, yeah, I've never really read the whole thing because I don't know. I just really didn't like how unstructured it was deeply. And I was like, he was like, yeah, it's kind of hard to get yourself centered in the book again, and drop in. I was like, literally found it the easiest thing. I just simply would zero in so hard anytime I picked it up. I just love it. I love it so much. I don't know how to describe it. He's playing with your mind. He's playing with language. He's playing with plot. He's playing with himself. There's just so much play in this book, and I love play. So, yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Well, here we go. I'm going to go on the opposite side of the spectrum. So I would say no. I would not recommend. There would be a very small population of who I'd recommend this to, and Ella being among one of them.
Yeah.
But I would say I just didn't finish it, and exactly what your friend was saying. There were tangents on tangents on tangents, which is in you would be in one plot, but then you would be taken out to get a backstory of one character and then thrown back in, but then you're also 3 inceptions deep as to where we are with who's telling the story. So that got me. I could not just read it, put it down, and then jump back in. I would have had to who are we talking to? Are we talking to the therapist? Are we talking to the old man in the cave? Are we talking to Bonanza? I don't even know where we are. So that was one of my qualms, because again, we all know this gal does not thrive on non-plot driven, non-structural books. And that's just my brain. And then I will say, I was walking through the metro as I was listening to this book, and I still have this phrase, seared into my brain as I was listening to the book, of her and the old man in the cave having a sexual encounter and something being licked off of someone's genitals, aka balls. And I still cannot get over that.
I don't even remember what was being licked off of the
Jenna,
old man's balls.
Lest we forget, you made me read the interstings, in which there was a 2-page section describing a man's testicles as he walked up a bunk bed. So, and that's your
fair. Touche.
Yeah. So, you know what? We all have our balls quotes that we remember.
I will say, one of my main qualms was the sex scenes of it all, but I think I was coming fresh off of reading some romance novels, But I will say one of the sex scenes that did stand out to me that I was like, this one I'm fine with, is Bonanza and Sissy.
Yeah.
Because I was like, they actually have a connection. And you're kind of like, oh, like, I want them to get together. And you also are like, yeah, that's how a woman should feel if she's getting...
I mean,
but
hey, the old man in the cave gave her a lot of orgasms.
I know. I think that's one of my favorite things about it is how like grotesque so much of the book is. And
I was gonna say,
as like I think like a horror movie lover, this is like a through line through
Mm.
things that I like, which is this sort of like grotesque, shocking, but very real. Because obviously people have these very potentially from an outside viewer like grotesque sexual encounters or life experiences that they still find lots of like pleasure and sensuality from. And so like as a 20-year-old, I was like, whoa.
Yeah, I kind of love that this book was brave enough to go, sex doesn't have to be hot. It can also be gross.
Yeah.
And I just...
And often it is.
You know, often it is. Like, honestly, we are kind of gross. And, like, let our freak flags fly. Like, I don't know. I really kind of... Also, like, I liked how abrupt they were. Like, it was just, like...
I did not. I did not at all. That's what shocked me.
We're sort of also learning interesting things about each other's approach to sex.
Yeah.
And that's a wonderful thing, Jenna. I feel close.
Yes, I know. Who would have thought this would turn into an hour-long sex talk?
God, if only someone would worship my thumbs like that, am I right?
Right? For someone to like really worship the most, you know, societally judged grotesque part of you and like find it so hot and beautiful, and she's just like disabled and queer and having casual sex and is like this like messy, complicated, albeit like by Tom Robbins, definitely like fetishized person, but it's just so.
Yeah. I will say, like, I don't have, like, because we read, you know, A Certain Hunger, which this girl gets off by, like, getting with her, like, she'll be dating someone and then be like, I don't really like you anymore, kills them, and then eats one of the parts of their body, and then, like, that's just, like, what happens.
Very
so I'm like,
cool.
and I loved that book.
Yeah, you did.
But for some reason, these were, like, the most jarring of sex scenes I have read. And I think maybe it's because they just come out of nowhere. Like, she's telling a story about something, and then, by the way, this also happened, which is very realistic, and maybe that's why it is so jarring, because it is so real.
One of my favorite lines in the book is when the psychiatrist is diagnosing her, and he's like, her main problem is she's just in love with an old 1,000-year-old hermit and a cowgirl teenager.
Relatable. Hashtag relatable.
Hashtag relatable. Hashtag relatable queen.
Well, we're kind of already getting into it. So with things we loved, I will say there's one thing that I absolutely, like, I got really into the beginning of the book because I was really into, like, the Richmond connection, because I lived there for the last 3 years. So I was like, I know what she's talking about. I totally know the landscape. I know Southern Richmond. Like, this is this is, you know, what I know. And I also know the stories of what Richmond was like, you know, back in the 70s, 80s, 60s even. And so it was fun to, like, dive into that. And then I got out of it. And then I got back in with the ranch. And I think I got out of it because of the cowgirl interludes. So this is also, we could take a drink. I got really confused. The cowgirl interludes. What is the point?
Fun. Having fun with language. No, I'm kidding. No, I think the point is, like, I think he's just having, I don't know. To me, like, this is what sparkled the most, is he's having fun with what a book can be. So you don't have to just have one narrator or one timeline or one, like, view of things. And I think, like, that happens with the cowgirl interludes as much as it happens with, like, the beginning with the amoeba, or, like, chapter 100, where he's just like, congratulations, reader, you've gotten to chapter 100. Let's celebrate. Let's have some champagne. Like, I think he's trying to expand your perspective on, like, what a book is, because I think we all get very used to in school or whatever, just like, this is your heroine, and she's gonna go here, and she's gonna do that, and that's amazing, and then she's gonna end up there, like, congrats. And so I really like it when a book's like, nah. And that's what I feel like the cowgirl interludes were.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think for me that was one of the things that really made me fall in love with the book so much, was just how hilarious I thought everything was and how surprised I constantly I was. It definitely took me a while. I think I read it over a summer, and I would pick it up and put it down a lot just because it's obviously like each section is so rich and so dense, and he's like fucking with you so much and like going in so many directions. But I think I almost sometimes approached it more like a poetry book where I'm
Yeah.
just like
Mm.
reading a section and like absorbing how chaotic and like clever and like genius. I mean, he's definitely like, I feel like I just assume that he's like a genius asshole as like a real person in
Yeah,
real life.
totally.
But yeah, I think just all of the silly little things that he does and where he's poking fun at you and him and everyone, all of the characters is like, yeah, it's so quintessential. I've read a few of his books and it's so quintessentially his style.
Mm. See, like, I love that idea of picking this book up like a poetry book, because I feel like I maybe would have had better luck if I read this over a span of a summer instead of trying to read this over a span of, 2-3 weeks.
Yeah.
Because it is a lot to, like, it's dense. It is a brick. Like, it may not be, like, that many pages, or it's fairly long.
It's still like a good amount.
Yeah, 360 pages, but, like, I think if I would have approached it in that sense, I maybe would have had a stronger appreciation.
Wait, what else did you like about the book, Jenna?
I'll tell you right now. I loved the like fluid nature of the sensuality, sexuality of each and every character. I think it was so like ahead of his time for being written in the 70s. I mean, like not really because you're kind of in the hippie movement, but like also yes, in the sense of like I loved how like Jellybean almost talked about like sleeping with the girls and sleeping with the guys at the ranch, of being like, we don't really care. It's just kind of who's here, and like if we're feeling the vibe, we go with it. And it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, I love that. Like having like a casual relationship established and kind of inviting Sissy into that and being like, you don't have to be married to like enjoy being with somebody, being with somebody sexually, and you can really discover your like sensual nature with whoever. It doesn't matter if they're a man, it doesn't matter if they're a woman, it doesn't matter if you're in the city or if you're on this dude ranch. Like I just loved like every aspect of that. I thought that was so cool and like so ahead of its time.
I actually only have sex with people in a city.
That's all I do.
Right, famously. Metrosexual. That's what that is, right?
Yeah.
No, that's very true. That's very, very true. That was one of mine too. I think like he even also talks about in the beginning of the book, he's like, because he uses he for the Countess, and he like has some warning in the beginning where he's like, I don't really care if you are like pissed at this, and it's really refreshing. I mean, it's like it wasn't an original idea in the 70s, but it also I feel like wasn't one that was like so casually regarded in like popular literature, and so like for someone to in one foul swoop like kind of defy gender normality and like sexuality normality and all that jazz was it's cool, and I just like how it's done. So yeah,
totally. I feel like this like conversation is making me feel very reflective, so I like end up talking about myself and when I read this.
I love it.
Please.
But when I read this book when I was 20, it was the summer. I was spending the summer in South Dakota at my grandma's cabin, like hanging out. Had just went through like a really like intense like season of heartbreak followed by a really intense season of casual sex, and like I was definitely like exploring my own queerness and like wanting to find adventure. And I think this book spoke to all of that so intensely that I like worshipped it.
Yeah.
Especially just because I think when you're reading it, if you're really connecting with it, I think you're like, do I want to be Sissy Hankshaw? Like, am I in love with Sissy Hankshaw? Like, am I Tom Robbins? Do I hate Tom Robbins? And I think I was feeling all of those things like so intensely. And it just like, and he's also like so self-obsessed and narcissistic, clearly. I mean, in the end, Sissy is like ends up with him, which is insane. That I think I was also like coming into this new phase of my life where I was gaining confidence, where I was sort of like doing a similar thing where I was like, I'm so amazing. Like Sissy would probably love me, right? So I was very much inserting myself into this book and envisioning myself in this like South Dakota landscape on the ranch with the cowgirls. And so it's a very like personally perfect moment that I read this book.
Yeah, no, I mean, you can't really beat that.
Yeah.
No. Well, I think that's like such a special thing about reading is like there is a book out there that, you know, if you picked it up at any other point in your life, it may be like you would have like liked it, but like you would have just like kind of like said whatever, threw it to the side. But there's always that one book that you pick it up and it is like the time in your life to hit when it hits. And you're like, this is the best book I've ever read. Like, this will change my life forever. I can't believe I've never had this book not in my life.
And then I think never change your mind that it's your favorite book.
Yes.
But you do learn more things about it. Like, even thinking now, like, now as, like, a person who is, like, doing a PhD in, like, queer theory, I'm like, yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot, as, like, an intersectional feminist, right? Like, there's a lot to critique in this book in, like, a really intense way.
And we're gonna get there.
We are gonna get there. Yeah, I mean, Ella, Dorothy, is there anything else, like, that you just, I mean, there's probably a lot, but, like, is there anything else that just really stood out? Like, this is why this book is what it is.
I would say two things. One is, for me, I feel like my frustration in high school and middle school growing up was that we were always reading books about boys. And that sounds like dumb, but it is so true that like when you're only ever reading like The Outsiders and Lord of the Flies, you're like, literally, can nobody femme be interesting? And then you read a book like this and you're like, thank fucking God, Jesus Christ, somebody who's like not
I can't believe you're saying that. We got Pride and Prejudice. We
Yeah.
got Wuthering Heights. I can't believe it.
It's just like, Jesus, who would have thought that like big thumbs, take a sip, big thumbs and like, you know, whatever, like, a jumpsuit could go so far, but, like, it really does. She's so complex. So I just like her as a character, and I love a vagabond. And then I also just love, like, somebody who's, like, Eisenhower was president for 20 years. Like, just, like, absolutely, like, just making no sense of time and space and history, where it's, like, this guy's been alive for 1,000 years. This happened in 1642 and also 1920. Like, everything is happening at the same time. And I just find that so fun. I just love a sense of, like, time out the window and, like, warping history.
Yeah, see, that's where I think you have to be super smart. Because for someone like me, I'm like, I don't understand. Like, no, I don't get it.
You're living in the concrete. I'm living up in the clouds.
Maybe you're too smart, actually. Maybe that's the problem.
The problem is you're too smart, and I'm just up there. I'm in the airheads.
Yeah, in the astral plane, maybe.
I'm in the astral plane.
And I think one of the things that we both put on here is the Cowgirl Ranch. I mean, that is, it's quintessential. I think, like, even if you haven't been to, like, a ranch, which, like, growing up in Colorado, like, everywhere that you go, like, I was up in the mountains, like, that's where, you know, every other exit is a ranch. But, like, if you went to summer camp, if you went to a science camp, if you went to chess camp, whatever you were into as a kid, like, you had that idea of, like, kids just being locked away in, like, a random cabin in the middle of the woods, in the middle of nowhere, and you don't have a shower, your bathroom is an outhouse, but for some reason, those are, like, the best 3 weeks, 10 days, however long you're there, of, like, your life, because you're bonding with these kids so, like, intensely, because you all are, like, experiencing life every moment of every day together, and you're doing all these fun activities, and you're, like, really just being, like, there. And I think, like, that's where you kind of romanticize that idea of, like, this cowgirl ranch. Like, this is fucking awesome. Like, I want to be there.
Yeah. Or you don't make friends with any of the kids and you sort of only become friends with counselors.
Right. For some of us.
Ooh.
Right.
Not naming any names.
Right.
Not
Or you're
me.
sort of, like, 12 and being invited to, like, the camp after party.
Okay. Brag about it. You didn't get to then. Brag about it now.
Ella's
sipping her first beer at 11.
Exactly.
No, but I totally agree with you. Like, and there is just something about I don't know. It's like, it almost felt like, go with me here, but it almost felt like when you're a kid and you're like sticky. You know what I mean? And you're like,
Yes.
you're just like, so gross from the
Totally.
day's adventures. And you're like, I don't even want to take a shower. I'm just going to go to bed. And then in the morning, I'm going to eat like chocolate. You know, it's like, life's so cool. That's kind of what the ranch felt like. It just felt like everybody was having like their most wild childlike existence at the same time, and I do love that.
Totally. It's so fetishized. Like Sissy's fetishized.
Yes.
You know, the cowgirl rants is fetishized.
Totally.
All these sexual moments are so fetishized in this way that creates this crazy, like, campy, absurd, like, sometimes like offensive, like, reality. But that it's like, I don't know, there's something so like rich and alluring and like delicious in there that you're like, oh, like this is horrible, and why do I like it? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
Like the words and the names, you're like, oh, like this is so gross, but like her name is Bonanza Jelly Bean, so how could I not love her?
Yeah, excuse me.
Yeah, just call any character Jellybean, and then it like
Yeah,
makes
done.
it automatically.
Bonanza?
Yeah, then it has my heart.
Bonanza. I love it.
The Countess.
The Countess.
I love that one.
I know, I love the Countess, Dolores Del Ruby. Like, everybody's got names that you're just like, man, I want a nickname like that. Come on.
Mm-hmm.
Even just the title, it was just such like a, you know, I just remember like having conversations and being like, my favorite book is Even Cowgirls Get the Blues. Doesn't that sound fabulous?
Doesn't that sound just positively avant-garde?
This is so fun.
I am curious before we get into what fell flat though. Dorothy, when you were like recommending this to people, if you're like, yeah, this is my favorite book, what was like your elevator pitch to try to get them to read this book?
I think I explain who Sissy is, right? I'm like, main character, a queer, sort of disabled person who hitchhikes with big thumbs, take a sip, who like goes on many adventures and like falls in love and ends up on a ranch full of cowgirls, but it is like really difficult to read, but is like the most interesting book ever. And usually I just make them read that single cell preface at the beginning, and that usually gets people somewhat on board, if not just like a little intrigued. So.
Yeah, I mean, how can we not talk about the two best pages of writing ever, which is the pages about the amoeba in the beginning and how that relates to Sissy Hangshaw.
Yeah.
Okay, are we ready to dive into what fell flat?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sad but true.
Well, I'll start with it's the actual structure of the book. And I think this is what happens. Like, this is what made it so that I could not finish it. It's not the content. It's not the character. Like, I love the characters. I honestly love the idea of this book. And, like, I think in a different circumstance, maybe when I was 20, I would have fucked with this book. But, like, I could not wrap my head around it. The way it was structured, the cowgirl interludes, the, like, the way that, you know, she was living out one plot, but then like reflecting back on how the old man in the cave got to where he was, and then how she would like reflect back on Bonanza, and then it would shift into something else. And so I think the structure of it is what really got me. But I know that Ella fucking loves these kind of books.
No, that's fair. It's okay.
But that is what, like, I think majorly fell flat. Like, that's what made it so that I couldn't finish it. But again, if I could read it in a span of, like, 4 months, I think maybe I could do it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, what about you?
We both had this down, but obviously the racial aspects of this book are not super hot. The old man in the cave has an incredibly racist name. And he like does bring that up, but like still, and there's just like racial politics that are very fetishizing and exploitative towards like indigenous people and like, you know, like Sissy adopting that culture as like, I don't know, appropriating it gets a lot. And so anyway, the racism of this book is not great. And also like Dorothy touched on, like, and you can go more into this too, just, you know, there were moments where I think he got exploitative also, that's the main word here, with like who his character was gonna be, and like kind of like fetishizing like her and her desires, and kind of manic pixie dream girling her a little bit.
Totally.
Which I get it, like it's hard not to do if you're a male writer in the 70s, but still is not always, you know, awesome. And I think that like there was an element to her. It's hard because like her kind of superpowers and her like kind of like superhumanness is very appealing, but at the same time you're very conscious of it being talked about in a way that is not necessarily in awe of her, but kind of like wanting her. Mm-hmm. And so there is that sort of like in between. So yeah, those are the elements for me that were a little bit like not great.
Totally. Yeah, I would say ditto to all of those things. I think even at the time, I think I was aware how fucking like male gazy this book is. Like, I think it's like, you know, just his descriptions of the sex scenes, even if you feel like you love it and connect with it, you know, Tom Robbins is like probably an old gross white guy. And, you know, remembering that sort of takes you out of it maybe sometimes. Yeah, racist stuff, really bad. Hated that. Hated it probably even more now if I had reread it just recently. But yeah, I think it's like, it's one of those things, and we think about this a lot in, I write essays. I read a lot of essays on queer horror movies and the way in which people sort of reconcile problematic depictions of queer people in movies because they connect with them in specific ways. And this to me feels very similar to that there is like, the writing itself is so fun and clever that I read it for that. And the fact that I connect with Sissy and that I love Sissy and I love the plot, I can sort of separate it from some of the sort of maybe like intention or like the thoughts of the author probably that were happening when this book was being written that like I certainly don't like.
Yeah. So, I mean, you take it with a grain of salt kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it's tough with any book. I mean, we faced this to, like, Rebecca and I reading Poor Things, where it's you with a book. I mean, Poor Things was written in the 90s, so actually that has no excuse. It's just a bad book. But like you face this issue if you're reading a book that's slightly older. I think it even is even more prevalent in the books like written from like 1950 to 1980, where you have like things that were just kind of normal, fine, whatever. And even though the writing is superb and like the story is so good, there's just some things that like you're like, oh, that sucks.
Totally. Yeah. Or a book like Lolita, you know, a book that is so like treasured and upheld because of the writing and how like beautiful it is and how much people love it. And like it is like pedophilia. And you're like, how do I read this and like enjoy this book and think it's beautiful and potentially love this book and have it be and not know what the author's maybe intentions were, or just assume that I think it's gross as well at like the same time? Like, how do you read a book like that and like process a book like that? And I think that one's maybe even more extreme, but in this book also, Sissy's like hitchhiking when she's very underage and is having sex with like adult men while hitchhiking and like being molested by them.
Yeah, and like acting like she doesn't care or suppressing feelings about it. And it is a very male version of what somebody would be going through like that.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that you talk about that, like one of the things that really struck a chord with me at the very beginning is like she's in this car and she's like, well, all I have to do to like get them to stop is just like flash my thumb like in between my thighs. And it's like, I don't like that. Like, yeah. I don't like that you have to think about that and that you're probably 14, 15 years old and like this shit is happening. I think I got a little uncomfy there and then it was fine. But once they flash forward and
you're touching on something though that's so interesting, which is I felt this way too reading the book where I was like, she's a real person and I hate that she's going through this. But then I was like, wait, he's writing her to be going through this. Like, she actually doesn't have to be. But so that was such an interesting dichotomy the whole way through where I was like, I really empathize with this character that he wrote, but he's also putting her in situations in which she's uncomfortable and like making all of us uncomfortable. And I'm like, what a weird thing to have to wrestle with.
I think that that's part of it as well, is like he
True.
knows this book is going to make you feel so uncomfortable and make you feel really weird and gross. And I think that's like part of it beyond just like the writing and him like pulling you in and out of the plot all the time, is like he knows that this book is going to be a book that a lot of people hate. And I think he like sort of gets off on that.
Yeah, he definitely does.
Yeah.
He definitely does.
I think you get that vibe from this book. And
Totally.
he definitely saw me and was like, good luck.
He was like, I dare you.
And I was one of the ones that ended up on the lower side of the spectrum. But before we move on, I do want to touch on one thing that we haven't touched on, which is the whooping cranes of it all.
Mm-hmm.
Whoop.
There it is. So tell me, why do you think it went on too long? What made it feel so long?
It just was like, I get the metaphor. Freedom. We understand it. Anytime there's a bird in a book, I'm like, this has to be 10 pages or I'm done. You know what I mean? Because it's just like, it's one of the most obvious things that you can do to link your character to a bird. So I think you got to be really mindful of how you're doing it. Was it funny that they fed the birds peyote? Yes. Was it cool that they ended up like traveling around the globe? Yeah. But like, and they had a good name. But I didn't need all the jam with like, the scientists and like the wanting to build a dome and like, it just was like, okay, like I get it. But I want more Sissy. I want more Bonanza. If I had gotten like 5 more pages of Bonanza and sacrificed 5 pages of Whooping Crane. Because also then, by the way, Bonanza Jellybean gets shot to death because the FBI is like, attacking the ladies over the Whooping Crane situation.
Which is also so classic, like kill off the queer character.
Well, but also, and then she ends up with Dolores, who's like boring as hell. I'm like, oh, okay, what? I really want to see Sissy fuck Dolores? Like, no. So, I don't know. That part for me was like, oh, it's too long, and it ended in my favorite character dying. Like, no.
Yeah.
Totally. I also remember it getting rougher around the Whooping Cranes era of the book.
Yeah,
Whoop indeed.
Whoop.
Anyway, that's my answer to that.
You're like, at this point, I know that I don't care. Like, I know that the plot is not the thing. So why so much of this specific plot?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, by the way, I'm fucking with you. There's no plot, but also we got to get really into why these cranes won't go
plot
south.
About the cranes.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, this feels like even kind of out of character for the book.
Yeah.
It's sort of weird.
Yeah, I think that actually explains it perfectly for why I couldn't get through. It's like, yeah, there is no plot, but let me get super into like one thing for 10 pages.
Yeah, but see,
like,
I like the clock watcher thing. I had no problem with Dr.
that
Robbins
one was
and his like drinking. I had no problem with, but it was just the
that I did, but
yeah.
What was that?
I said that I did. The clockwork I was interested in. I didn't like, again, was like, why? How are we here?
Yeah. But we're here.
Okay, final ratings. So this is where we give a rating of a book out of 5. 1 to 5. I'll start because we'll end on a high note. I said that I gave it a 1.5. I gave it a 1 because he wrote the book. I genuinely don't think I could give it higher than a 1.5 because I didn't finish it. And that is, I only gave it the 0.5 because I do think what it was doing was something super interesting. And like, I aspire to be the person that reads this book and been like, that's sick. I love that. I am not that person. And I am the person that got lost in the sauce. I don't think I connected with it. I think the sex scenes were just a little too abrupt, and literally would like, I like was walking through the metro and had to like turn it off and be like, and I think like the character of Sissy was so interesting, and I really liked her, and I really wanted to follow her, but Tom Robbins got on my nerves, and I don't think I like him. which is weird because I love his character so much. But
Good summary.
but I think 1.5 kind of summarizes it, where I'm like, I wish I could be the person that appreciates this book, but I cannot be, and I don't think I was the target audience, and that is okay with me, and I am accepting my fate.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I originally gave it a 5 out of 5. I'll knock off 0.5 for the just the racism and kind of fetishization aspect of things, but I love a nonlinear book so much. It's crazy. Like, this like ticked all my boxes. This scratched every itch. It's like crazy. Like, I just loved her as a character. I loved all the side characters. I loved that everybody had a crazy name. I loved that we didn't care about space or time or history or place or anything, and we were all just sort of existing and rapping, and I just really liked his way of speaking and random interludes, and a hermit. You can never go wrong with a hermit, or a cowgirl, or, you know, a big thumbed lady. So there was just a lot for me that spoke to my inner soul of, you know, as Patti Smith would say, being like a 9-year-old boy forever. So I just really love all the energy that's coming off of it. So yeah.
Yeah, I think I have no choice but to give this book a 5 because I've made it such a part of my personality to like this book. I think, you know, I think in the same way that you were saying, like, I wish I could be the type of person that did like this book. I think that was sort of my reaction when I started reading it, is I was like, oh, I'm very much trying to figure out who I am at this time. And like, in reading this book, I was like, oh yeah, I do want to be the type of person that likes this book. And I think I really do like this book, but I had to spend a lot of time marinating in it before I sort of figured out for myself, like, how to reconcile the parts that I didn't like. So yeah, I love this book. It's queer, it's sexy, it's grotesque. 5 out of 5 for Dorothy.
Yeah, 5 out of 5.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nothing.
That felt like a yeah with something on the end.
Can I read my written 5 out of 5 answer? Because I just really liked what I wrote. Absolutely. I love plots that mean nothing, and I love nostalgia and desert and cowgirls and road trips and wandering and ridiculous names and stories about amoebas and large hands and free love, dude. And this is one of my favorite things. All of my favorite things rolled into one.
Well, speaking of other books, let's get into pairings. So, Dorothy, we like to end this show with a segment we call Pairings. So we'll pick TV shows, movies, and other books that might pair well with today's book. I hope you had fun.
Prepared.
I did.
Yeah.
Ella told me 5 minutes before, so.
Nice. I think it's a fun one, because you get a lot of different answers, because it sparks a lot of different things. You're like, well, it made me feel this way, or it kind of reminded me of this. It has a similar plot here. I mean, if you listen to our last episode, which I'm sure you did, we did.
Dorothy listens to every single one.
Yeah, I'm sure. But I did really our last book, which was like a noir dystopian novel, to Detective Pikachu. So it can go anywhere.
Strong.
It can go anywhere. Yeah. All right. Well, we'll start with drinks. I'll start and then I'll pass it to you all. So I just did a beer. I feel like it encapsulates, like, if, you know, I think in the 70s especially, you're going on a road trip and you just like, all right, let's have a roadie type vibe. And so, like, that's kind of what I imagine. It's just like a simple, you know, store brand type beer is what I felt.
Store brand beer.
Love it.
I did a Dirty Shirley.
I love it.
Because they kept drinking Ripple, which was like described as like some sort of alcoholic strawberry situation. And I was just like, what's something that's just like, like opulent, word of the day, opulent and like too sweet and sticky and like kind of reminds you of childhood, but also like gets you drunk. And I was like, oh, that's perfect. So yeah.
And I chose, as Ella mentioned earlier, a pickle juice margarita. And that's because I think that Sissy Hangshaw would really fuck with a pickle juice margarita.
Would.
It's classic. It's a little silly. But we all love it once we try it. And I think
Sissy
Sissy
loves
would too.
pickles.
Yeah, although she would have a hard time holding the glass, I imagine.
Yeah.
Or she would just wrap her thumb around it.
I love it. Awesome. TV show one did come to mind, and that is Chimp Crazy, and it is a new one on HBO.
The new one. How is it?
So fucking good.
Is it about
is
crazy chimps?
It's about people
I don't-
who raise chimps and keep them in their households.
Oh my god.
Mhm.
It sounds like a reality TV show, like from Planet of the Apes.
It's from the makers of
Yes.
Tiger King.
Yes.
From the makers of Tiger King. God.
Yeah.
Sounds really good.
Yeah. I feel like it's a pairing in the sense of like the plot is not what you think. Like everything goes every which way. You don't know what is happening at any time. And also like the main character of it is just very unpredictable, and you have no idea what she's gonna do. And the whole time you're just at the edge of the seat, which I feel like I was like with Sissy. I was like, I don't know if she's gonna stay with Julian. I don't know if she's gonna just like, go to this ranch. I don't know if she's gonna keep vagabonding for the entire rest of her life. You just don't know. And so I was very intrigued by this main character of Chimp Crazy, as I am with Sissy Shaw.
That is wow. That is wow.
Yeah.
I chose this show called The Midnight Gospel, which I think I talked about it in an episode a long time ago, but let's bring it back. It was one season, and it was this podcast called the Duncan Trussell Family Hour. They took like podcast episodes and animated them to be about this like guy named Clancy, and Clancy goes through time and space and is talking to these like sort of all-knowing being aliens. And it sounds ridiculous, but honestly, it's like the most meditative thing, and it just ends up being about like love and death and psychedelics and like all these like wild concepts, and you want to keep watching for the animation, but then at the same time you're like internalizing all this information. And the last episode got a lot of attention because it was his interview that he had done with his mom, who had since passed. And so it's his mom sort of talking about mortality, because I believe she had cancer, and his mom sort of talking about mortality. And so it's like you're seeing these really silly animated characters talking to each other, but they're having these like really intense, beautiful conversations. And so I think that's like why this reminded me of that, is just like encasing truth in silliness is the MO I like. And the Midnight Gospel is awesome, and it's very reminiscent of this, because it's just people with ridiculous names and beings talking to one another about life.
Amazing. I'm just gonna piggyback off of encasing truth in silliness, because that was a sick ass quote. But I chose a classic, and I selected Girls.
Yes.
Because I feel like it's very absurdist. It has a widely loathed writer. I think you're getting some sexy. I think you're getting, a lovable but flawed heroine. I think you're getting adventure for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I selected Girls. Need I say more?
No, that's such a good one.
So good.
Oh my god.
You win.
The way that Hannah Horvath wishes. She
Oh
was
my
Sissy
god.
Hanshaw.
Yeah. No, I'm sure she loved Cowgirls.
Yeah.
But for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah. Oh my god. Literally.
Awesome. So, book. Part of me originally was like LA Woman, with the non-linear storyline, but also kind of like her just speaking in her very distinct voice in this book.
Eve Rabbits is Sissy Hanshaw, but with boobs instead of thumbs.
Yes, literally. But LA Woman I really enjoyed, so I don't know. Again, the non-linear either hits or it doesn't, I guess, for me. But I think that one was fascinating, again, like a woman like coming of age in a time that is just very confusing for women to come of age, and also like very sexual for women to come of age as well. But I love you, Babbitts. I think it's an amazing book. That's one that I've recommended, and also recommended to my mom's best friend who lives in LA, and I was like, you would really like it. So we sent it to her for her birthday.
And you can listen to our LA Women episode now.
So. Yeah, linked in the bio.
Link in bio.
I was going to say, click here, but it's a podcast, so that doesn't really work. Like that.
Click to the sound of my voice.
I appreciate it.
I chose Inherent Vice by Thomas Pichon. He's a writer of the same era, and I think it's that sort of like postmodern guys being crazy writing where you're like, oh my god, absurdism. But it's a book about a very confusing character in Doc, and he sort of is always high and an incredibly unreliable narrator and living in a made-up town in California in the late 60s/early 70s. And it's a totally unfollowable plot. The movie is no more than helpful. Neither the movie nor the book makes sense, but it's really just vibes, and that's sort of what this is. You know, even Cowgirls is vibes more than it is plot. So if you sort of want the male version of Sissy Hangshaw, may I turn your attention to Doc. I cannot remember his last name. It's something vaguely Italian.
Sportello.
Sportello, thank you. Doc Sportello from Inherent Vice. Really good book. Like, really good book.
Amazing. Now I want to read it.
Yeah. You can borrow my copy.
I will. I sort of chose a cop-out answer. I just looked at another Tom Robbins book.
No, it counts.
Which is my second favorite Tom Robbins book, which is called Jitterbug Perfume.
Perfect.
And it is about how to make love last. It is about a perfume maker. It is about making the olfactory descriptions. Are, you're like, how can you describe that many smells in a book? It's insane. They're trying to make this like holy grail of all perfumes. There's a lot of references to beets in it. You know, I could explain more, but I don't really remember the plot because, again, it's a Tom Robbins book. But if you liked this book and you like Tom Robbins, then that's a good one.
I love that. I know I did see that was kind of one of his more well known of Tom Robbins, or well liked of Tom Robbins books. But okay, Jitterbug Perfume, maybe again in 10 years.
It doesn't have a Sissy Hangshaw, which is why I don't like it as much as this book. I think it's really good, and it doesn't have as much of some of the gross stuff from this book, which I think is maybe why it's been better received, but it also doesn't have Sissy.
Yeah, but the man knows how to throw two words together. Jitterbug Perfume.
I know.
Like,
so good.
I'm like, are you, where, is it a drawing board, or are you just coming up with this
Yeah,
stuff?
is it like the William Burroughs thing where he's just like cutting words out of magazines and like putting them to each other, and he's like, that's it.
I would like this.
Probably. Okay, movie. Now this is where we get off the rails a little bit, but stick with me
because
here.
we both chose Anna Faris movies.
Anna Faris.
Excuse me.
Sorry, but as an Anna Faris fan, I'm just kidding. Yes, so I chose House Bunny, which is, so good.
So
funny.
good.
Like, all time, I think it has to go in, like, one of my top 10 favorite movies of all time, just because, like, it is so funny. You get Emma Stone, like, launching point. Like, this is her launching pad for becoming, like, the hot Emma Stone that we now know. And then we have just, like, this cast of characters. And you have Anna Faris, who comes in as this Playboy bunny into a sorority, trying to revamp this sorority and make them hot and make them, the it girls. And one of the sorority sisters is pregnant. One is in a back brace.
Yeah.
So she's working with a lot. But I think it's just that camaraderie of females, and also kind of like knowing, the underlying message of like, you're so much more than your hotness. In the early aughts, as much as you can get into it. But I think
so. You're making me realize that like literally Anna Faris is the Sissy Hangshaw, and that sorority is the ranch. Like that is crazy.
I think like in my head, like when they first mentioned the ranch, I was just like, it's House Bunny.
Yeah.
Like this is who it is. This is who it is. But yeah, just a great great hang. And I feel like you get definitely like Cowgirl Ranch vibes in a sorority.
If only that's what a sorority was,
God, I
right?
know, literally.
My God.
Literally.
My God.
Literally. I chose the Gregoraki film Smiley Face. Gregoraki, he's now getting his flowers, but went under the radar for a long time. 90s queer filmmaker making very queer, weird movies in the 90s. But this was one of his later projects in the early 2000s, and Anna plays a woman who is so high the whole time. And it's basically like, I think it's an hour and 10 minutes, but she's like, I don't even remember what her mission is. Like, again, the plot is not the main thing here. Her character is. And so basically she just gets super high and I think has to get to one part of town and like deliver somebody money, but she just cannot do it because everything keeps going wrong because she's so high. And so she just keeps talking to people and ending up in different parts of LA and like wandering, and she's in her pajamas and she's just an absolute mess and a disaster. And she's so funny. She just spends the whole movie being like, what? And it just really gave me this energy where it was just like, you couldn't follow it, but there's a really cool person in the center of it, so you're on board. And
I love it that the description online isn't a German-American stoner film. That's what it is. All right.
I chose one of my all-time faves, which is But I'm a Cheerleader.
Yes.
The queer cult classic, starring early Natasha Lyonne, who goes to a gay conversion camp run by none other than RuPaul. It is so highly saturated. The colors look like candy. It is so campy. It is sexy. The conversion camp is sort of like the ranch in and of itself, in that they're all sort of like fucking and escaping and like doing little adventures, and it's just so amazing. And I think the absurdity of it is marries well to the absurdity of Even Cowgirls Get the Blues.
very true.
I love it. I've never seen it, but it has Melanie Linsky in it.
Oh yeah, it does. It has Clea Duvall in it. It has all of our 90s booze in it.
Yeah, it's a cult classic and it's great.
It hits hard.
And I think it's a quick hit. I think it's like under an hour and a half. So.
Yeah, no, you can get away
Unlike Tom Robbins, it's a quick hit.
I might have to watch that. I fuck with it.
Oh, you'd love it. You'd absolutely love it.
Awesome. Well, that's fun. So here's our next read. Dorothy, feel free to come on. I mean, this has been fun. So please, if you want to,
our next choice.
Yeah,
it's coming out in October.
So
the book is
no, this episode.
Oh,
the next episode.
The episode, right?
No, this one came out in October of like 1850. Yeah.
Wait, can I do it? Can I do it? Because I want to do the
Bram Stoker's
books.
Dracula.
Yeah, it's
How did I guess that? How did I guess that? But
I've never read it. Here's what happened. My journey with Dracula is I picked it up when I was like literally 9 because my dad had a copy, and I started reading it, and I made the decision. I went, this is too scary for me.
So
and I put it back down. But I just remember being so immediately enraptured, even as a kid, and so I really want to read it.
Yeah, I read it in high school English and loved it, and of course I love the movie, and it's so sexy and amazing and spooky.
Yeah, that is what we're reading next. I cannot wait. Halloween month.
Yeah.
Spooky.
I know. I'm actually very exciting. I'm very.
You are exciting.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Very excited. Jesus. Because Rebecca and I recently read Frankenstein. So we read Frankenstein and Poor Things together. And I was not a fan of Frankenstein because the writing is very 1800s. So I am optimistic that Dracula will be the classic that I am excited about. I did have a friend say, oh, I recently read Dracula. I feel like people are weirdly coming to Dracula again. I
agree. I have multiple friends who've told me they read it recently.
Whoa, there's something in the air.
I know.
Yeah. And she was like, it was kind of fun because you have all these kind of vampire tropes, but it's
the
like
OG.
the OG. Yeah. So it's kind of fun.
Invented vampire tropes.
Yeah, I'm excited. And also, fun fact. So it was Mary Shelley Percy, who was her future husband, and then
Right.
John Polidori.
Didn't they dare her to write it?
Yeah.
And Lord Byron. And they were all just sitting around because the volcano exploded, so they couldn't go outside because like, there's so much ash in the air. So they're like, let's have a contest who could write the scariest story.
Oh, that's what it was. Yeah.
But John Polidori was like a big movement in the vampire genre. So Dracula, Bram Stoker. Optimistic, I like it. I don't think I will, but I will give it a go.
Why won't you like it?
Is it the language? Yes, the classic literature.
I don't think you're gonna do that. I think you're gonna love it.
I'm gonna
if you get bored.
Yeah, maybe that's what I'll do.
Yeah.
Winona Ryder in her terrible accent, or Keanu Reeves in his terrible accent. There's so much to choose.
I can't wait.
So good.
It's so good. Gary Oldman's sort of giving a good performance, and then these two sort of like hot 90s stars are in it also, you know?
Yeah. I mean, why not? Why wouldn't you?
It's so funny to see Keanu Reeves try to be British. Highly recommend.
Oh, I'm gonna watch it. Don't worry.
Yeah.
I'll do my research. You know me.
Yeah.
All right. Well, until Dracula, our next one. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you, Dorothy.
Cheers.
So fun.
Thanks, Jenna. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Dorothy.
Cheers.
Cheers. Bye.
Well, that's the show. Thanks so much for listening. If you liked it, please go give it 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening to this episode right now. Leave us a review to tell us what you loved and what books you want us to review next. If you want more book-related content, you can find us on Instagram and TikTok at RW Reads Podcast. That's at RWREADSPODCAST at RW Reads Podcast on Instagram and TikTok. Until next week, keep your books open and your drink glasses full. Thanks all. Red Wine Reads is a Just Better Media production. Each episode is produced by Jenna Weston and edited by Rayan Ashtar.